Hey, my friends, we will be right back to the show. But I have a question for you. Are you struggling with the impact of childhood trauma? Well, know that you're not alone. I'm here to let you know that I'm starting a brand new weekly coaching group that includes a year of life coaching, accountability, support, habit and goal setting, and more. I'm starting a waitlist for the group right now, and I'm only taking a handful of people. And I'll let you know that through this personalized coaching, we'll work together to help you understand how your childhood trauma has shaped your beliefs, behaviors, emotions, and will help you create a roadmap for healing and growth. Right now, you can schedule an absolutely free coaching session with me and get put on the wait list if you go to thinkunbroken.com. My friends, it's your time to turn your trauma into triumph, breakdowns into breakthroughs, and become the hero of your own story. And I'm here to support you in doing that. Just go to thinkunbroken.com to register for a free coaching call with me and to get put on the wait list for the brand new weekly coaching program. Hey, my friends, we will be right back to the show. But I have a question for you. Are you struggling with the impact of childhood trauma? Well, know that you're not alone. I'm here to let you know that I'm starting a brand new weekly coaching group that includes a year of life coaching, accountability, support, habit and goal setting, and more. I'm starting a waitlist for the group right now, and I'm only taking a handful of people. And I'll let you know that through this personalized coaching, we'll work together to help you understand how your childhood trauma has shaped your beliefs, behaviors, emotions, and will help you create a roadmap for healing and growth. Right now, you can schedule an absolutely free coaching session with me and get put on the wait list if you go to thinkunbroken.com. My friends, it's your time to turn your trauma into triumph, breakdowns into breakthroughs, and become the hero of your own story. And I'm here to support you in doing that. Just go to thinkunbroken.com to register for a free coaching call with me and to get put on the wait list for the brand new weekly coaching program. We'll be right back to the show. But before we do, I want to tell you about today's sponsor, factormeals.com, where if you go to factormeals.com/unbroken50 and use the code unbroken50, you can get 50% off your first order. That's factormeals.com/unbroken50. If you're like me and you are a person who is busy trying to create a life, heal, work on their health, wealth, and relationships, and not to mention deal with the day-to-days of normal life, you do not have time to be going to the grocery store and trying to figure out what you're going to cook every single day of the week. In fact, one time I did the math and I realized I was spending over 15 hours a week at the grocery store and cooking. When I added Factor, I got to use that time for myself, for my family, for my friends, for my community, and for my business. And so if you're in the place where you need some more support in the kitchen, head to factormeals.com/unbroken50 and use the code unbroken50 to get 50% off.
Do you ever feel like life is a never-ending series of lessons while you try to find purpose, meaning, and answers? I am Vanessa Fontana, the host of Figuring Shit Out, a podcast where we undertake self-help, coming of age, and healing. As I live my 20s in New York City figuring shit out myself, I've realized that if you spend your whole life trying to get your act together, you don't have a life. You have an act. On Figuring Shit Out, every Sunday, you get to normalize the journey of not knowing and be guided into living your life with more intention and ease.
Hey, my friends, we will be right back to the show. But I have a question for you. Are you struggling with the impact of childhood trauma? Well, know that you're not alone. I'm here to let you know that I'm starting a brand new weekly coaching group that includes a year of life coaching, accountability, support, habit and goal setting, and more. I'm starting a waitlist for the group right now, and I'm only taking a handful of people. And I'll let you know that through this personalized coaching, we'll work together to help you understand how your childhood trauma has shaped your beliefs, behaviors, emotions, and will help you create a roadmap for healing and growth. Right now, you can schedule an absolutely free coaching session with me and get put on the wait list if you go to thinkunbroken.com. My friends, it's your time to turn your trauma into triumph, breakdowns into breakthroughs, and become the hero of your own story. And I'm here to support you in doing that. Just go to thinkunbroken.com to register for a free coaching call with me and to get put on the wait list for the brand new weekly coaching program. Hey, what's up, Unbroken Nation? Hope that you're doing well wherever you are in the world today. Very excited to be back with you with another episode with my guest, TL Durand, who is the author of TOXIK. TL, my friend, how are you? What is happening in your world today?
Oh, I'm wonderful. It's a beautiful day in Phoenix, Arizona, only 108 degrees today.
As it does in Phoenix.
Yes,
So for
yes.
those who don't know you, tell us a little bit about your background, how you got to where you are today, and why you decided to write TOXIK.
Great. So a little bit about my background. I grew up in the Midwest, originally born in North Dakota, moved to Wisconsin, then lived in Wyoming, just, kind of a country girl, living the simple life. And in 2008, my husband and I moved from up there down to Phoenix, Arizona. We wanted to get out of the snow and out of the cold. He's in construction, so we thought this would be a great place for him to do his business and be able to work year round. We moved down here. My sister was here. It was a really good life for a while. I had a daughter. My youngest daughter was with us, and we were here probably 8 months when he was in a motorcycle accident and he passed away. So that really threw me into some turmoil, obviously, being a single mother. My daughter was only 8 years old at the time, so she wasn't really sure what was going on in her world. But I lived with my mom for a while. She moved down here too to help take care of us and to be there for the family. So we lived with her for a little while. And then we got our own place, and I started to feel like I was ready to get out into the world, and met who I thought was a really wonderful, fabulous man, and was so excited about everything that he had to offer to me and my daughter. I had a pretty good job at the time. I'm an accountant by trade and was working at a really fabulous place. They were there for me the whole time throughout, the loss of my husband and everything that we went through. And so I was in a pretty good place, but I was ready for some fun and adventure. I had been a mom pretty much, because I do have an older daughter. So she was 13 when that happened. And I really never had a chance to, live my life. And this guy came along and just seemed to be everything. He seemed to be everything that I wanted and everything that I needed for myself and my family. And he really just swept me right off my feet. I've always heard the expression and I kind of laughed about it, but then it happened to me. And yeah, my whole world was great for about 6 months. And then the reality of the relationship and the person started to set in, and everything changed pretty quickly. And that relationship went on for a very long time. So now to get to the point where I am now, there's been a lot of ups and downs, and I'm so excited and thankful to be where I am now.
We'll be right back to the show, my friend, but I wanted to let you know about our brand new podcast community for Think Unbroken podcast. I know that for so many trauma survivors like myself, for the longest time, I felt alone, like nobody got it, nobody understood, and that I was just going to have to figure this out on my own. But that's not true. And the reason why we created our brand new Think Unbroken Academy podcast community is so that we can bring all the members of the Unbroken Nation together in a place where we can learn, grow, heal, change, and transform our trauma into triumph. I would love to have you come and be a part of the brand new community. Just check out thinkunbrokenacademy.com or click the link in the podcast description, and I cannot wait to see you there, my friend. Again, just head over to thinkunbrokenacademy.com, and until then, be unbroken. Yeah, that's quite the story and quite the journey. And obviously my heart, I'm sure many of the listeners go out to you. One of the things that I'm curious about and where I'd like to start this conversation is looking at this space and time around falling into this relationship, being swept off your feet, and kind of what happened there. Talk to us about that experience and what started to happen.
Okay. So the night I met him, I was out at a bar, which I hadn't done in a very long time, and my sister dragged me out, and we were just having a good time and just happened to meet him. And I wasn't looking for a relationship. I was looking for a little bit of fun. He seemed kind of fun, but at that night, and then it was a couple weeks later when I finally met up with him in person. And he talked about his plane and his cars and his motorcycles and his houses and all the trips he'd been on and all the jobs he'd had and all the famous people that he knew. And he was just very confident, very outgoing, very sure of himself, pretty much everything that I felt that I was not. And so I was so just drawn to him like he had all the qualities I wished I had. And it felt like he completed me and he was going to be this great provider and this just really fun person. And I just got tangled in that whole web of everything because the last 9 months of my life had been so much chaos, since my husband passed away and just everybody feeling sorry for me. And, I didn't even want to talk about what happened with my husband passing away because I was so tired of people feeling sorry for me. And this was like a whole new world where nobody knew my story. And it was quite a while before I actually even told him my story because I didn't want him to treat me any differently because of that.
Yeah.
So
And what was the swing, right? Because obviously, me understanding and knowing kind of the depths of the book and the experience, I'd love for you to kind of go into depths about what started to transpire that would eventually lead down the path that leads us to this conversation.
in the relationship, I was I was very taken in by him, like I said, and I didn't want to lose that. So he would start to it only took like 3 or 6 months. It wasn't a very long period of time before little things started happening. In fact, if I think about it, the first few things that started happening were within a couple of weeks. But I just kind of blew it off because I was like, I'm not in a relationship with this guy. His behavior is however he wants to act. But as we went along, things things progressively got worse, right? So things that seemed like no big deal, all of a sudden I would bring it to his attention and it seemed like a big deal and then he would justify it. And so I would think to myself, well, he's just a confident person. He's a big city guy, so he acts differently than I do being, more introverted or country girl. I just don't understand the way that he acts because he's had a different upbringing than I have. So he would just his behavior just got more and more controlling, more and more hard to understand, and he would just justify it. Or he would blame it back on me. Well, if you didn't do this, then I wouldn't have done that. And he had such a huge group of friends, seemed like friends. Like he knew everybody, everybody loved him. So I thought, well, it's definitely got to be me. Like if everybody else loves him, then something is wrong with me. And that literally was my feeling because if you read the book or you talk to any kind of, abuse survivor that's been in an abusive relationship, you're thinking, why didn't you just leave? And when I was in that situation, I never once thought it was his fault. I never once thought that anything was wrong with him. It was always me. So I thought that if I worked harder on me, then everything would be just fine.
What were some of the signs or the things that were happening early on that might have or could be beneficial to somebody listening to be aware of or on the lookout for?
W- One of the biggest things was, like I said, when I first met him, he just talked about all of his stuff, right? His planes, his motorcycles, his houses, all of his money, all of his travels. So narcissists typically exaggerate or their worth and they try to make themselves seem better than they actually are. So he talked about a lot of things that and didn't really talk about himself as a person that much. It was always about his things. So trying to impress me with his money. He bought me really expensive gifts. Like, I'm not a jewelry person, but he bought me like 1 carat diamond earrings and necklaces, and we went on trips to Miami. So one of the things in the beginning they often do is try to lure you in with money or promises of something that they think that you might want, which is trips or gifts. Those are some things you can notice right in the beginning. Um, Most people don't do that. They talk, they want to get to more know you on a personal level. And another thing he did is probably within 3 or 4 weeks of me knowing him, he was starting to tell me that he loved me. He was calling and texting me all the time. He always wanted to know where I was, what I was doing, how I was doing. He was overly complimentary about literally everything in my life, right? Which most people don't do. Like, normal people don't try to rush into things. They don't, you give compliments in the beginning, but you don't compliment everything. You don't try to give extravagant gifts. You kind of go into things slowly. And he was just 100 miles an hour from, the first time I met him.
One of the things that you said that I think is really interesting that I want to go back to, because I think it will help create some context and where, especially in where you were at the time emotionally, is you said that you thought, the thing that was the problem was you, right?
Mhm.
He has all these friends and everybody knows him and like all this. And that feels, and from my understanding, to be very common, a thing that a lot of people arrive at when being in narcissistic or abusive relationships. Like, I'll even tie it to my own experience of being a child. Like, I always thought to myself, the reason I'm in this abusive household, it must be me. Right. This is probably
Right.
my fault. This must be because of how I behave or the way that I think or things of that nature. And so when you were in that, were there other people around you that were like, hey, you might want to second guess being in a relationship or around this guy? Were you just so deeply enmeshed in it at that point? Like, what was kind of going through your head where you think when you were thinking this, I guess is what I'm drilling down to.
Right. In the beginning, no. Everybody loved him. My family loved him, my friends loved him, my kids loved him. Everybody thought he was the best guy ever because all of the things that he did that were emotionally abusive were never in public. He never hit me. He never called me bad names in public. He never put me down in public. Nothing that happened in public. So nobody no like one of my friends actually said to me, you need to let him take care of you, because I was trying to be very strong and independent. I had a child, I was a single mom, and somebody actually said to me, you need to let him take care of you. Men like to take care of their women, and you need to just kind of back down a little bit and let him do that. And that was kind of the starting point of me actually doing that, because it's not my nature, honestly. So nobody suspected, nobody knew a thing, and they probably wouldn't have if I wouldn't have started to tell them some of the things he was doing behind closed doors.
And as you got into that, I think one of the things people are so scared of when they're in that those kind of relationships, and I'd love to know your thoughts on it, is like, at what point can you, I guess what I would drill into here is, at what point do you know that you're in a toxic or abusive relationship? Because I think that so many just subtleties and things are elusive in these
Mhm.
kind of relationships. So if someone's listening and they're like, okay, maybe some of this makes sense to me. My private life with this person, male or female, is very different than my public life with them. Are there some like other telltale signs that you could use to have this kind of open communication with people in your life?
Yeah, of course. Some how would I say that? Some of the telltale signs, like when I was in the toxic relationship, I didn't know it. I honestly, we were together probably 7 years. And it wasn't until I got out of that relationship and started hearing the word narcissist. I never once thought he was a narcissist until I was out of the relationship. And you can look back in hindsight and be like, wow, you read things, you hear things, and you're like, wow, he did that to me. And I didn't even, It didn't seem right. There were a lot of, I considered it disrespectful things that he did. And, for example, one night I went out with my friends and my sister, and I came home and he was mad and he had cooked me some food. And so I went to bed because I had been drinking too much. I didn't want to eat. Well, he came in there, tore all the covers off me and threw the food on me because I didn't eat the food. And I didn't think, oh, he's so toxic. I thought, wow, that was really disrespectful. So when you're in those relationships, you don't there's more information about it now, so maybe people do start to think that, but you just think, wow, this is not normal behavior. I would not treat you that way. And I think that's probably the biggest red flag. If you're thinking, wow, this is not how this is supposed to be. If you start to get that gut feeling that I would never treat somebody that way, that's probably your biggest red flag right there,
Yeah,
because normal people don't do stuff like that.
yeah, that's actually a really strong point. And hearing you even tell that story, I just think to myself, holy shit, like that's super intense, right?
Right.
What was the point in which, actually, let me ask you a different question because I think this will be really, really helpful for people. I think most people will hear something like this and be like, whoa, that would be the moment I would leave. Like no
Right.
questions asked. And I just know from A, being a coach for so long, and B, speaking to people who've had stories like yours, like that just sometimes is not the case. How do you leave? Right? How do you put yourself in a position to take your life back, take control back from this? You've sat in it, you've looked at it, you've said, you know what, actually, this is a toxic relationship. I'm with someone narcissistic. And again, I believe this goes male and female. Both sides
Definitely.
can be guilty of this, of course. But in this, where is the line in the sand? For lack of a better way to phrase it, I wish I had a better word that came to mind, but I don't. Where do you start to leave a relationship like this?
I started to leave probably 5 or 6 times, honestly, and he would do what's called love bombing, right? So he would realize that I'm leaving, or he would actually move out for a few days, and then he would go back kind of to the beginning of our relationship where he was complimentary. He wanted to take me on dates, he would buy me gifts. So I actually got sucked back into the relationship, like I said, probably 5 or 6 times before I finally realized, I started to see like the 90-day cycle of he would be on his best behavior, trying, and everything was wonderful. And that's why you stay, is because you crave that high of the beginning of the cycle where everything is wonderful and fabulous. And you think, well, if I just do XYZ, then we'll get back to wonderful and fabulous. Or if I keep doing these things, then he won't go back to that bad behavior and we'll just stay where we are. Well, eventually I started to realize that this was pretty much a 90-day cycle, and I didn't want to keep going through that, honestly. I didn't want to keep putting my daughter through that or my family through that. And at first, I started to withdraw from my family and friends because I didn't want them to know that I was still in this and nothing changed and he was doing the same things
And
over
were
and
they
over.
aware at that point? Did your community kind of had a better idea of what's happening?
No,
Like
they had no idea.
they still had no idea. What?
No, they didn't know. In fact, when I moved out, I was too afraid to tell my family and friends because I was so sure that he was going to find out somehow. And
Mm.
so I didn't tell anybody. I didn't start packing until 8 a.m. the day the movers showed up. They were showing up at 9. I started packing at 8 a.m. because I was terrified that of what he was going to do. And I didn't tell him I was moving out until the night before. And then that night I slept with a gun under my pillow because I was terrified of what he was going to do. And I made my daughter go sleep somewhere else. So it was a really hard decision. I think it was easier because my daughter was involved. Like things between him and her, he pushed her. He started to get more and more out of control. And he was getting more aggressive. He wasn't physically abusive, but I was afraid it was getting there. Like he came home one night and just he was trying to find the keys for one of our vehicles and he just trashed the whole house trying to find those keys, and he was walking around and he was yelling and throwing things, and I'm shaking right now. Like, I was terrified, and my daughter was there for the whole thing. And so that night and that experience was the point where I was like, I have to get out of here before this thing does turn physical.
Yeah.
And I already had a plan in place. Like, for months, I had written down on a piece of paper, I'm going to do this. I need to take these things with me. This is where I'm going to get a vehicle, because I didn't have a vehicle. I didn't have a job. I didn't have any money. And I had laid out a whole plan on my like emergency exit plan and like an actual move out plan.
And I'm so glad that you did that. You know, I can't help but sit here and think like, and rewind to the relationship my mother had with my stepfather, and just never leaving that situation, never walking away, and the abuse that we suffered at his hand, and her not doing that. And I understand why when I look back at it, because there's so many circumstances. I mean, it's just like you said, you had no vehicle, you had no things. Sometimes the control in these relationships is literally everything, the entire livelihood of people. And I think that the fear for a lot of people, and I believe this was my mother's experience as well, was they didn't know what to do. Like, if you were to lay this out, because I want to create some massive practicality here and rewind you a bit, lay out what it looked like for you to create this game plan, because I want to give people who might be listening to this a starting point for how to get out of a relationship like this.
Right. For me, it took a while. Like, you really have to think about, what's important, because I can't take everything with me. So you want to make sure you have like your legal documents in place. You want to make sure you have money. You have a safe place to go where they can't get to you or find you. You want to have obviously a vehicle, and you need to have a way to support yourself. So that's kind of the technical part of it. Um, and just really think about what you're going to need in your life to support yourself. The harder part is the mental part of it, because you by the time you get to that point in the relationship, you really have no self-confidence. I had no self-confidence. I questioned every single choice I made. I I I didn't know how I was going to survive on my own, and I didn't know how I was going to provide for my family. And you almost just have to take a leap of faith, because I didn't know how I was going to do it. I had the technical part down. I knew I could borrow money from this person, and I could get a job, and I could get a vehicle, and I could, take all my legal documents with me and my important mementos. The rest of it, the how to, how am I going to survive without them? You miss them. You want to be with that person that they are in the beginning, and you just have all of your hopes and dreams pinned on the life that they've told you that you're going to have with them. And you have to find a way to realize that that is not reality. Everything they've said is not a reality, because you feel such a loss, right? Like, the biggest hardest part about moving out, and the day that I moved out, I literally had a breakdown in a parking lot of Sam's Club on my way to get the U-Haul, and called my best friend and said, I can't do this. I can't. What am I going to do? I'm going to lose everything that I have, and I don't know how to go on without him. And she was just like, he's never going to change. Everything that he's told you is a lie, and you have to get out for you and your daughter. So, when somebody's trying to get out of one of these relationships, it's actually the emotional part that's really the hard part to get past. And that's the part that keeps sucking you back in, because to figure out the money and the transportation and the job and the living, that's actually the easiest part. But you get so caught up in your emotions that you need to have those steps written down, or you're going to forget something.
Hey, Unbroken Nation, we'll be right back to the show, but I wanted to let you know that you can grab a copy of my first book, Think Unbroken: Understanding and Overcoming Childhood Trauma, for free. If you go to book.thinkunbroken.com, you can download the PDF ebook version of the book and get everything that I know about the baseline of healing trauma for free, downloaded to your email right now. Just go to book.thinkunbroken.com to download your copy of Think Unbroken: Understanding and Overcoming Childhood Trauma for a PDF for your phone. Again, that is book.thinkunbroken.com. Yeah, that's very powerful. And you
Yeah.
said leap of faith, and I can't help but think how true that must be. The willingness to go for it. And in this circumstance, it's like, I think about this like it's such a dark, complex scenario where everything is intertwined, enmeshed, and groomed into this. And yet that you have to make that decision.
Yeah.
And you talked about that leap of faith. What advice or thoughts do you have around people who are listening and they need to have that leap of faith that they've contemplated, they've been in pre-contemplation, they're a decision away from action? Because one of the things that I fear the most is that, another person in a relationship or another child comes and exists in the childhood like I had, where it's hyper volatile and incredibly dangerous and you get hospitalized and all those. And I think to myself, like, if I were to give someone a piece of advice here, what would it be? What is something that you believe can help somebody take that leap?
Mhm. My best advice for that would be to realize that you you have people that will help you. We feel isolated usually. I felt so isolated, like I couldn't trust anybody, and you have to trust that somebody is going to be there for you. And especially when you're not in a physically abusive relationship, like nobody knew what I was going through. And I had to reach out to people and tell them what was going on. We try to keep it a secret, we feel ashamed, we feel guilt, and narcissists especially are really good at making you feel that way. Like you have to trust in the people that you used to trust in, so family and friends. I would say that would be my best advice is you have to be vulnerable and you have to, which is so hard to do because the narcissist takes your vulnerability and they just brutalize you with it, like just use it against you in every way. And you have to remember back, maybe remember back before you were in that relationship, like who were your go-to people back then? Because now you're not the same person you were back then, but you want to, those are the people who are going to be there for you now. So that would be my best advice is think about, who were my go-to people before this happened and can I go to them now? I have to put myself out there to get out of this situation that I'm in right now because otherwise it's never going to change.
And I'll have to say this, that the people around you will help you. And I think that a lot of people fear that they won't. Again, to your point about being in isolation, is
Mhm.
people think, well, nobody's going to be able to help me. They don't get it. They don't understand. And I'm like, people get it. Like the one truth I know probably more so about the human experience than anything is that the people around you want to help you. They want to see
Right.
you succeed. They want to get you out of these kind of experiences. And a lot of times they'll give you a couch or money or a car or whatever it
Yeah.
is to help you get out of that, because innately I do, and inherently I do believe that people are good. Just unfortunately sometimes there's extreme extreme circumstances that we get in.
Right.
So you're in this moment, you're in the U-Haul, you call your friend. What's next? Because I think this is kind of the pendulum swing, right?
It really was. It was That was I wouldn't say that was the hardest day of my life, though, honestly. There was a moment probably 9 months before that where I suddenly realized that he's never gonna change, and that was my lowest point, and it was, like, 3 months after we got married. I realized he was never gonna change, but in that moment, the moving out moment, honestly, I can't remember much from that day. I was in such just shock, disbelief. It was it's almost like an external body experience, right? Like I'm just going through the motions. I get the U-Haul to the house. He knows I'm moving out. He keeps every room that we're in, he keeps coming into that room and just standing in the doorway. Just standing there watching me. And I had to take boxes and just start in one corner of each room and just go around and start throwing stuff in boxes. And I was so detached from all of that. Just there was no emotion. There were no emotions that day. I was very task oriented. I have to get these things done. And by the end of the day, my body was exhausted and my mind was numb, and I just collapsed into at my new house. I just collapsed and just cried for probably 6 hours, honestly. And my phone was blowing up, right? Because the whole time I'm moving out, he's texting and calling everybody I know. My family, my friends, he's calling everybody I know to tell them that I'm leaving him and he doesn't know why. So not only am I trying to get through the day and get my stuff done and moved, my daughter's there with her boyfriend trying to get their stuff done. My phone is blowing up with family and friends. He's hovering over me like this whole day is just ex- is so exhausting. And the next day was so exhausting. I couldn't even start unpacking. I just laid in bed most of the day.
You know what came to mind is I feel like, and I don't know, I wasn't there, so this is why I'm asking you the question. This must have been to some extent a sense of relief. And if it was, where does the healing journey start in this?
The day after was a bit of a relief, and then so I moved out on a Friday. Saturday was a bit of a relief, I kind of relaxed and just like I said, stayed in bed and thought about what I was going to do next. I was starting a new job on Monday because when I moved out, I didn't have a job. We owned a business together, and he was keeping the business, and I had to go get a job. And then Sunday rolls around, and I start unpacking things and feeling really good and all excited for my job the next day. And it was probably 4 or 5 days after I actually moved out that I thought, "Holy shit, what did I just do? How am I ever gonna survive without him? And how am I gonna do this?" I was trying to think of, the reality of it, and I wasn't making very much money. I didn't know how I was gonna afford rent, like, I was good for 1 month, but what happens when bills come due next month? And so I started to miss him. I started to question my decision. And now, he's contacting me. He wants to know if what he did wrong, what he can do to make it right. He's doing the whole love bombing thing, trying to get me to come back to him. And this cycle just goes on for months, honestly. I would go talk to him and try to work things out. We're married, maybe if we live in separate houses, but we still see each other, everything's going to be okay. We can work it out. And it took 2.5 or 3 years actually before all of that stopped. And I finally started my healing journey and realized who he really was. So the healing didn't by any means didn't start when I moved out. You can't just get out of a toxic relationship. There was so many ups and downs and so many things that happened in the 2 years after I moved out. And yeah, it was probably 3 years after I moved out before my healing actually started.
Yeah, I mean that makes so much sense to me.
Mhm.
What did that healing journey look like? Like, what were your experiences? What did you find worked really well for you? What did you find didn't work really well for you? What became kind of the process of, for lack of a better way to phrase it, like rebuilding yourself?
It was really hard because I didn't trust myself for anything. I was very introverted. I had a lot of social anxiety. I didn't have many friends. My daughter was getting ready to graduate from high school, and it was the point like 4 months before her graduation, because my whole life revolved around her at that point, right? I'd work and I'd do stuff with her. And I thought, holy shit, she's moving out. She's graduating in 4 months, and I have no life. So that was kind of the aha moment that started me uh, on my healing journey. And the first thing I did was got a life coach. And my life coach walked me through some hypnosis, which if you've never done hypnosis is a totally amazing experience, and it was so helpful. It took 2 sessions to totally get me out of social anxiety. And my life coach did NLP with me. So that was kind of the beginning, is to to gain some confidence of myself, to break down those walls of self-imposed, social anxiety and introvertedness. And I would do little things that made me happy, right? So I, for example, would color in a coloring book. Like I was a 3-year-old coloring book with the big pictures and the crayons, just kind of simple things to just calm my nervous system, right? Playing with Play-Doh, I listened to music, I'd go for walks, things that I could do by myself that I didn't have to worry about the judgment of other people, the criticism of other people, but they made me feel good. They made me feel good about myself and just making simple decisions and just kind of doing whatever I wanted, right? Because everybody makes fun of a 40-year-old that colors in a 3-year-old coloring book, right? But I didn't care. I was happy. It was mind numbing. It was relaxing. So that was kind of where it started. And I really love to hike. Moving here from Montana, I really love to hike. So I was too scared to go hiking by myself. So I would just go walk around like a neighborhood park by myself. And I felt so proud of that. I remember feeling so proud the first time I just walked around a park by myself. The first time I went to a restaurant by myself. So in the beginning, I did so many things by myself. I love to do everything by myself. And then realized, you need to have a little bit more than that in your life. So I got my brother-in-law to go out with me one night dancing. And we went to this bar, a local bar, and we went out dancing. And it was really fun. And he's very social. So we met a ton of people. And I forced myself, it was so hard. I forced myself to go back the next week because all of those people would still know me, right? And that's how I started to make friends. I kept going to this bar. I wouldn't go out drinking. I would just go out dancing or shooting pool. I joined a dance group, and from there, my friends have exploded. My life is so busy now and so fun now that literally have to schedule time off. And it all started with, coloring books and Play-Doh and just doing things for myself.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I think so much of this journey is, and again, I hear it, and you didn't say it, but I'll say it, facing the fear, right? Being
Right.
willing to go and put yourself in uncomfortable circumstances and situations to grow, to figure out who you are, to understand at depth and scale, a deeper level of self. I think about it all the time. Like the only way that you grow, the only way that you create and understand who you are is by the willingness to face what's in front of you. And I think that's such a powerful point that I hope people will hold on to is, yeah, I mean, you know what? Sometimes you got to fucking color in a coloring book. Like, fine, it is what it is. But what are you like seriously, like, what are you willing to do to have the life that you want to have?
Right.
And I think that's a really, really difficult question. And I think it is the question of life. As you're in this and you've gone through the healing journey, life is so much better, and you're looking at what it is that you want to have in your life, who you want to be, what you want to create. Why did you decide to write this book?
I decided to write the book because there's so much talk about narcissism right now. And, there's checklists, how to spot one, how to avoid one, how to get out of relationships. There's movies about relationships with narcissism. There's songs about it. Like, we're all aware of narcissism. We don't need to raise awareness of that anymore. But the thing I realized reading those things, watching the movies, listening to podcasts about them, is the things they're talking about are kind of from a psychology standpoint. They're not actually the reality of it. So I decided to write the book because my relationship with the narcissist wasn't anything like anything I'd read in an article or a checklist or seen on a movie, because all of it was behind closed doors. Nobody knew what was happening. There was no physical signs. Like, he wasn't physically abusive to me. He didn't cut me down in public. He didn't do any of those things that you typically think of a narcissist or a toxic person doing. It was all it was all behind closed doors, and it was all emotional. It was all mental, just a mental mind fuck, for a better lack of better term. It just really was. And so I thought, you see people in physically abusive relationships and you know that's abusive relationship, but if it's not physical, how do you know? And they're really good at gaslighting you and saying, "Oh no, that's not what I said, that's not what I did. You misunderstood." You start to tell other people about it and they do the same thing. Like victims of emotional abuse, they kind of get gaslighted by society too, because they see the side of the narcissist that he wants them or she wants them to see, and think they're a grand and wonderful person, and so I must just be taking it the wrong way, or being over dramatic about whatever. So I wanted to write the book, and I didn't use any clinical terms in the book. I wanted to show people how you get into this kind of relationship, how it's not as black and white as the checklists make it seem, the articles, the movies. It's not like that. The reality of it is way different. You're not going to see some checklist and be like, "Oh, that guy's a narcissist, I'm walking the other way." That is not how it works.
Yeah, it's definitely not. And sometimes I see those and I go, wow, what a great way to put people in a corner, because people
Mhm.
always find all those checklists apply to everybody. I promise you, we all have those
Right.
behaviors, but the real life of it, like you said, and which is one of the biggest reasons I wanted to have you on the show, is because it is very different than just what's portrayed in the media and on
Mhm.
television and on checklists and blogs.
Right.
That said, tell everyone where they can find the book and learn more information about you.
Okay. The best way to find the book and learn more information about me is on my website, which is toxic-books.com. Uh, that really is the best way. I do have a Facebook page too, but it's not so much about the book. It's called Triumph Over Toxic, where I share, memes and books and podcasts. I'm going to share some of your podcasts on there and your books, and just kind of trying to help people who are past the initial stages of trying to get out. Like there's a lot of like support groups, great support groups on Facebook for people who are in narcissist relationships and trying to get out. And I'm kind of, mine is more past that, right? Like you're past the initial shock, you've moved out, you've moved on, and now you're celebrating your triumphs, you're kind of looking back on how things were and maybe laughing at it a little bit, making fun of that and realizing, you were kind of a dumbass back then, or, just whatever. So we've triumphed over the toxic and now we're moving on with our lives. We're owning our story and writing the next chapter.
I love that. And there's so much about own your story or let your story own you. And so I'm a big fan of that. And of course, we'll put the links in the show notes for all of the Unbroken Nation to go and find out more. My last question for you, my friend: what does it mean to you to be unbroken?
I love this question. I love the answers that people have given on your podcast. And for me, to be unbroken means to live my life on my terms. Like I'm no longer defined by my past mistakes. I'm no longer defined by my trauma, even though it's something I live with every day. It no longer defines me. And I own my story. I've come out of that darkness and stepped into my strength, honestly. And that strength has allowed me to share my story with with everybody, right? Because before I was ashamed of it, and now I have the strength to share it and help other people do the same. Like you don't have to stay stuck in that darkness, and you can share your story, and you can live your best life on your terms.
Brilliantly said, my friend. Thank you so much for being here. Unbroken Nation, thank you so much for listening. Please like, subscribe, comment, share, tell a friend. And until next time, my friends, be unbroken. I'll see ya.
Yeah. Thank you.
We'll be right back to the show, my friend, but I wanted to let you know about our brand new podcast community for Think Unbroken podcast. I know that for so many trauma survivors like myself, for the longest time, I felt alone, like nobody got it, nobody understood, and that I was just going to have to figure this out on my own. But that's not true. And the reason why we created our brand new Think Unbroken Academy podcast community is so that we can bring all the members of the Unbroken Nation together in a place where we can can learn, grow, heal, change, and transform our trauma into triumph. I would love to have you come and be a part of the brand new community. Just check out thinkunbrokenacademy.com or click the link in the podcast description, and I cannot wait to see you there, my friend. Again, just head over to thinkunbrokenacademy.com, and until then, be unbroken. Thank you so much for listening to Think Unbroken. Please share this episode with someone who could use it and help us move forward in our mission of ending generational trauma in our lifetime. And if you would, please take 5 seconds to pop on iTunes or Spotify, hit that 5-star, leave a review, and you can also reach out to us on social at Michael Unbroken or at Think Unbroken. And of course, you can check out our YouTube channel at Think Unbroken. Thank you for being a part of Unbroken Nation, my friends, and until next time, be unbroken. Hey, my friends, we will be right back to the show, but I have a question for you. Are you struggling with the impact of childhood trauma? Well, know that you're not alone. I'm here to let you know that I'm starting a brand new weekly coaching group that includes a year of live coaching, accountability, support, habit and goal setting, and more. I'm starting a waitlist for the group right now, and I'm only taking a handful of people. And I'll let you know that through this personalized coaching, we'll work together to help you understand how your childhood trauma has shaped your beliefs, behaviors, emotions, and will help you create a roadmap for healing and growth. Right now, you can schedule an absolutely free coaching session with me and get put on the waitlist if you go to thinkunbroken.com. My friends, it's your time to turn your trauma into triumph, breakdowns into breakthroughs, and become the hero of your own story. And I'm here to support you in doing that. Just go to thinkunbroken.com to register for a free coaching call with me and to get put on the wait list for the brand new weekly coaching program.